Welcome. Tonight, we begin with a less than ideal scene. A coastal city, scorching sun, winds full of sand, and somewhere in the distance, the blare of trumpets from an approaching army. You are in Halicarnassus, 334 BC. You are not a warrior, not a noble, not a historian. You are a commoner. This seems safe, until you realize you're living at the exact moment when Alexander the Great, called the Light of Greece and the Shadow of the Rest, has just set foot on the coast, near your home. Good news, you're still alive. Bad news, no one is sure how long that will last. Before you have time to clear out your granary or hide the small statue of a local god in an oil jar, you hear the sound of war drums. Not the inspiring background music, like in the movies, but a heavy, steady, chilling sound, like the footsteps of fate. Your neighbor, an old man who makes leather sandals for Persian soldiers, barricades his door while muttering something in an ancient tongue. To stand still, as if immobility could make you invisible. It doesn't work. From the city walls, the shouts of the defenders rise, then fall silent. The smell of smoke begins to seep through every crack in your house. Someone screams that Alexander has arrived. Another says he rides a horse black as night, laughing as he cuts off the heads of 3 guards. You don't know if it's true, but you know one thing. Today is not a good day to be a peaceful citizen. You're not a soldier. You don't know how to use a sword. You have a shovel, a sack of grain, and a cracked clay pot for water. No one handed you a guidebook on what to do when Alexander conquers your city. You've heard he's a brilliant commander, studied with Aristotle, loves poetry, enjoys philosophy. But as you hear the thundering boots of Macedonian soldiers knocking on doors, you start to doubt philosophy will help much when your city is under siege. There's shouting, then crashing. A cat, you think, darts across the yard as if it too is trying to evacuate. The smoke thickens. You hear a child crying, and its mother telling it to be quiet, or the Greeks will take your voice too. You don't know if the Greeks can take voices, but you know if they get here, they'll take everything. People said Alexander could be merciful if a city surrendered. But then you remember Thebes, where he was merciful by raising it to dust. You look out the window, a small slit in the wall covered with cloth, and see smoke rising from the marketplace. The place where you used to buy sesame seeds, spices, and sometimes a bit of gossip. Now there's nothing but ash and screams. You try to think of a place to hide. The wine cellar, occupied by Persian troops as a storage. The well, you can't breathe in there. Under the ancestral altar, nothing sacred remains after the soldiers sacked the temple. Breaking dishes, someone sobbing, and a Macedonian soldier saying to you, or someone else, you're not sure, don't be afraid. We bring civilization. You think, if this is civilization, then savagery must be people sitting around singing. Someone is dragged from the house next door. Another is kicked down in the yard. A little girl screams father before being pulled away. You bite your lip, your eyes sting. You don't know if it's from the smoke or fear. And then, the lid of the jar is yanked off. Light floods in. A young face, tanned, straight nose, firm jaw. A Macedonian soldier. He looks at you. You look at him. Neither says anything for 3 seconds. Then he bursts out laughing. You're a civilian, huh? You nod. Good. We need people to clean the stables. And so, you, a resident of Halicarnassus, who only hoped to survive the winter, are now officially employed. No pay, no choice, and no right to refuse. Congratulations. You've survived the moment Alexander took the city, at least on paper, because surviving technically doesn't mean you're whole. After being pulled from the grain jar, like an onion, harvested out of season, you're handed a broom, made of twigs, and a rag. Sweep the barracks yard, they say, and make sure to clean up the blood. You don't ask, whose blood? Partly because you're afraid of the answer, partly because you're trying not to vomit. The streets of Halicarnassus, once a bustling trade hub where you ate honey cakes and listened to singers perform ballads about sea gods, are now the stage of a delirium. Broken bricks, thick smoke, and the smell. Oh, the smell, not the smell of victory, not the smell of glory. It's the smell of burning hair, horse dung, unwashed bodies for 3 weeks, and something like spoiled fish, fermented in bad wine. You think, if sound had a smell, this would be the symphony of the apocalypse. The sound of hooves no longer echoes singly like in Homer's epics. No more images of noble steeds galloping across plains. Instead, it's a chaotic clatter, mud splattering, hooves trampling stone and bone alike. A horse gallops by, pulling a wooden cart filled with spoils, statues of gods, fabrics, precious jars, and you think you saw wrong. A human arm, wearing a gold bracelet. Those who once lived here now lie scattered like forgotten props after a performance. Someone screams for their mother. Greek voices, Persian voices, cries, shouts, "I surrender." And too late. There's a brief moment when you step over the body of a man you once borrowed a ladder from to fix your roof. He lies on his side, eyes open, mouth as if trying to say, "Watch the third rung." You want to stop, but a Greek soldier barks, "Keep sweeping, slave." You sweep, not out of fear. There's one thing history books often don't make clear. When a city surrenders to Alexander the Great, it doesn't mean peace. No polite treaty signing ceremony, no celebratory wine, no scene of both sides shaking hands in the glow of sunset, like on the cover of a history book. Instead, surrender is simply the fastest way to get listed, things to be sorted. And you, a Halicarnassus resident, who once thought bowing your head would save your life, are now standing in a line, as long as the Persian Empire's debt. In front of you is a stone table. Behind it, a Macedonian officer, with a beard trimmed as meticulously as a statue. Each person, when their turn comes, is asked their name, age, profession, and level of usefulness to the army or state. If you say you're a poet, they ask if you can carve letters on shields. If you say you're a healer, they assign you to the wound detoxification team, with your first task being to clean pus from a cavalryman stabbed in the groin. If you say you're a philosopher, they ask if you've memorized the Iliad, and if you say no, they conclude, not qualified to teach Greek children. A 14-year-old boy is pulled from the line because he looks strong enough to hold a spear. His mother cries. A soldier kicks her down, saying, "You should be proud. Your son gets to serve the empire." The boy looks back, eyes full of fear, lips clenched as if trying to swallow tears. You don't know his name, but you'll never forget that look. When your turn comes, you say you're a potter, not because you are, but because you once knew a potter, and it seems harmless. The officer looks at you like you just claimed to be a tree. "Can you make fireproof pots?" he asks. You shake your head. "Can you make sand for molds?" You hesitate. He writes on a slate, "Auxiliary Civilian, Class C, review in 30 days, temporary water carrier," and so you're officially kept, in the literal sense. You're given a red cloth to tie around your arm and led to the main square where the successfully surrendered are being divided into teams, groups, units, like slaves in a market. Some are assigned to clean barracks, some are sent to dig trenches, some, you pray you don't end up there, are called officer service units. No one explains what service means, but the look in the Macedonian soldier's eyes is clear enough to make you shudder. An old woman is mistakenly placed in a youth labor group. When her daughter runs up to demand a switch, the soldiers don't speak, they just draw a sword. No one asks to switch again. You start to realize surrendering isn't the act of the wise. It's just the beginning of a series of choices you don't get to make. The first day begins with the sound of your door being kicked off its hinges, as if the wind itself were furious. A group of Macedonian soldiers storms in like well-fed wolves, still hungry for a bite. They don't say sorry, they don't need to. They say inspecting the empire's property, and start inspecting by overturning everything you have. The grain jar is smashed, not because they're hungry, but because they think gold might be hidden inside. They don't ask for the goat hair blanket you saved from the snowy year. They take it to wipe their hands after eating roasted goat skewers, cooked with wood from your family altar. One of them takes the clay pot your mother left behind, not because it's valuable, but because it's a nice green. He holds it, twirls it like he's dancing, then drops it, shattered. No one apologizes. Your entire house, small enough that you could cook and touch the roof at the same time, is now a temporary rest stop for road-weary soldiers with muddy boots. You're ordered to sit quietly in a corner to avoid interfering with the joy of victory. You don't ask what that joy is, but you hear shouts, breaking objects, laughter, and somewhere sobbing. Your neighbor, a young girl who always smiled, is dragged to the house next door. The soldiers say they need someone to show them where local resources are stored. She doesn't come back. Nightfall doesn't bring silence. It only makes the sounds of looting clearer. Doors slamming, oxen bellowing, probably being led away, and the sound of "ooh, this is nice," followed by silence. You hug your knees, leaning against the dirt wall. Your house, where you were born, where you carved your first letter into wood, is now a place where you can't touch anything. You're a guest in your own life. The second day brings more guests, not just soldiers, but war merchants, trailing the army. They wear long robes, carry cloth bags, and sell back the things just stolen to the people who lost them. You see someone hawking your scarf, the one with your mother's name embroidered on the edge, for 2 drachmas. You have no money. You ask, "Can I trade labor for it?" He laughs. You're already working for the Empire for free. A soldier takes your cracked clay oven from the yard and uses it for a game of throw stones into the hole. The winner gets a fig. The loser has to drink sour wine. You don't know the rules, only that each time wine spills on the ground, the stench makes you want to vomit. You ask a young soldier, "What happens after 3 days?" He grins, not bothering to look at you. Things go back to normal. The city's been civilized. You wonder what normal means, but don't ask. You're tired. The third day is the day of fire, not because it's cold, but because everything deemed worthless is piled up and burned. Old wood, torn cloth, books not written in Greek, all turn to ash. The soldiers gather, sing, and dance around the fire. They chant Alexander's name like he's a living myth. One climbs onto your roof, plants a Macedonian flag, and urinates on it. You don't know what ritual this is, but you're sure it's not in the Iliad. An old man is beaten for hiding an ancient bronze lamp in his sleeve. The soldiers say, "That's victory property." He says, "It belonged to my ancestors." They reply, "Now your ancestors serve Alexander too." They take the lamp, say nothing more. He sits down, trembling. You want to hug him, but your hands are holding a straw broom to sweep the yard. That afternoon, a horn sounds, the signal for the end. 3 days are over. A soldier knocks on your door, speaking as casually as if reminding you of a schedule. Starting tomorrow, you are new citizens of the Empire. You look around. Your house is empty. The altar is gone. The water pot is cracked. The curtain is torn into bandages for soldiers. Even your cat is missing. Maybe it was eaten, or worse, given a Greek name. You don't cry. Your eyes are dry. You don't speak. Your throat burns with smoke. You just breathe, each breath borrowed from someone else. And you think if this is Greek civilization, then at least savagery, let people keep their mother's cup. After 3 days of legal looting, the soldiers tire of rummaging through every corner for gold, statues, or ancient wooden boxes holding love letters. Now they move to the second phase of restoring order, turning civilian homes into temporary barracks. And unfortunately, your house, small, cramped, leaning left, and smelling of damp grain, is near a well and a fire pit. 2 things the army considers strategic conveniences. You know you're in trouble when a group of Macedonian soldiers stops at your door, bangs on it with spear handles, as if it's a city gate, and shouts, "Here, spacious enough. Good for horses." Before you can protest, they're inside. One pushes your wooden table aside like it's a branch in the way. Another throws a pack onto your bed and hangs armor on the house. Post your mother carved with the fire god's mark. No one asks what you're doing. One sits on the doorstep, removes his boots, shoves his scratched foot in your face, and says, "Get water to wash it." You think he's mistaken you for a servant, or worse, an object, but you comply, because resistance now means wounds, and you still have 2 arms, 2 legs, and a faint hope that tomorrow might be worse. But today isn't the end. Once the soldiers settle in, meaning they take your bed, lie back and snore like thunder in a cave, horses are brought in, not to the yard, not to the porch, but to your kitchen. Yes, your kitchen, where you once baked honey cakes and roasted grain, is now an impromptu stable. A brown horse named Perseus, according to its owner, tramples the basket of beans you saved through last winter. You want to scream, but you only hear your own heartbeat, not from anger, but fear. You spread straw on the floor, clean up horse dung, and hear a soldier joke. You could be a good farmer if you serve the Empire right. Another laughs, saying, "Don't forget to lock the back gate." Rumors of rebels sneaking in at night. You think if there are rebels, They're probably living a few mountains away and don't care about your piss-soaked kitchen. At night, soldiers gather around a fire, lit with wood from your bookshelf, and play a coin-tossing game. The winner gets to pick a prize. The loser stands guard. What's the prize? You don't ask. You only know 2 young girls were brought in that night. One sleeps in the corner of your house. The other, you don't see her the next morning. In the morning, the soldiers patrol, and you're assigned duties, fetching water for horses, cooking porridge for soldiers, and keeping the house clean as a royal barracks. One hands you a filthy cloth and says, "Wipe the sweat off my armor. I'm Alexander's guard." You want to ask, if you're the guard of such a great man, why don't you have your own cloth? But you don't ask. You wipe and keep wiping. By nightfall, you hear a soldier tell a joke in Greek. The others burst out laughing. You don't understand, but you laugh along. Not because it's funny, because you're afraid if you don't, they'll ask why, and if you don't answer quickly, you'll get a new task, like cleaning horse hooves with your father's old shirt. The next day, you wake up in a corner of the house. Your back aches from the dirt floor, your neck from the cold night. You look around, soldiers still sleep, clutching shields like lovers. Horses chew straw, their rhythm reminding you this isn't your home anymore. The kitchen isn't a kitchen. It's a place to hang saddles. The altar's wood was used to prop up a chair. The window is blocked with an army cloak to keep cold wind from heroic sleep. And you're still here, like a shadow of yourself. No one locks you up, but you have nowhere to go. No one orders you to serve, but you can't stop, because the place that was once your home is now part of the great empire's logistics strategy. A rest stop, a checkpoint, a spot on a map no one will remember by name, but they'll recall because there was clean water, healthy horses, and quiet locals. You think, maybe one day after the army leaves, you'll sweep the floor, rebuild the kitchen, carve your father's name back onto the post. But not today. Today, you just hope Perseus doesn't trample the rice sack you hid under the straw. And if you're lucky, the soldiers will get drunk early tonight, and you can sleep a few hours in your own house, next to a horse that isn't yours, on a floor that no longer belongs to anyone. You used to think taxes were something you only paid if you had land, oxen, or at least a harvest to reap. Wrong. In Halicarnassus under Alexander the Great, you pay taxes for one simple reason: you're still breathing. And in this great empire, your breath is state property. It's the 10th day since Macedonian soldiers turned your home into a supply station. You're carrying water from the well when you hear an unfamiliar horn. Not a war horn, not an alarm. It's a tax horn. A group of soldiers arrives with a bearded man in a red tunic, holding a leather scroll. He introduces himself as the tax administrator for the southern district of New Halicarnassus. New, because old Halicarnassus was burned. He doesn't need to smile. He has armed soldiers behind him. In his hand is a list of what you may contribute to Alexander's glory: grain, wine, spices, bronze, cloth, and if you have none of those, labor. Unit of measure, every heartbeat still ticking. You ask, what do I have to give? He looks at you like you just asked which direction the sun rises. You have strength, you have time, you have the ability to survive. That's enough. He plants a small wooden stake in front of your door, hanging a red cloth marked Class C surcharge, survivor type. That afternoon, you're summoned to the main square. A crowd is gathered like goats lined up for sale. A soldier shouts, from now on, every household pays 1/10 of everything they have. Call it the tithe of honor. Protest, you lose everything. Can't pay, you work it off. An old man raises his hand, but I have nothing left. He's struck on the head with a spear shaft. Now you have debt. You scrape together what could still be called possessions: a handful of cracked rice, a piece of wood, and the sandals you're wearing. You turn in the rice, keeping the sandals because the ground burns your feet. The soldier frowns. This is it. You nod. He laughs. Fine. You'll help carry water to the new temple, built for Alexander, every day. No skipping. You think, a new temple? We have no lamps, no schools, no market, but we have a temple. Of course. Civilization needs statues. In the days that follow, you realize Halicarnassus is being divided into tax classes. Those who once had land, are now temporary property holders, paying in goods. Former merchants are active trade civilians, paying in information, contacts, or old items. Commoners like you are unskilled civilians, meaning reserve labor, meaning you pay with your life itself. Some think of escaping. A young, skinny boy with a hunched back who used to bake bread slips into the forest at night, carrying a few rough loaves and the belief that no one will remember him. The next morning, his body is hung in front of the well. Below it, a sign in both Persian and Greek. No one may forget their duty to the light of civilization. Every morning, soldiers patrol each house, checking the tax records. Those who don't meet their quota are called out in public and reminded with whips, reminded with public shaming, reminded by taking away the one thing left, faith in justice. One day, while carrying water, you meet your elderly neighbor. She smiles toothlessly and says, "I've paid my share." You ask, "With what?" She points to her feet. "Bare. The leather shoes my son made for me last year." She now walks barefoot on sharp stones, but her smile, strangely, remains. She whispers, "At least I still have my head." You return home, set down the water bucket, and look around. Nothing to pay with, nothing to keep. Everything could be labeled potential tax. The walls, ordered to be dismantled for bricks to build a temporary bridge. The window, commanded to be stripped for wood to make military signs. Even the scrawny chicken you kept for eggs, registered as a reserve military protein unit. You don't know what to do, but keep breathing. And breathing, now, is a taxable act. A young man whispers, "We're living in a prison, without walls. Every meal is a reward for obedience." You don't dare nod, but you think, "He's right," and then you carry more water. At the end of the first month, a tax collection ceremony is held. There's music, flags, and sweetbread made from grain taken from the people. A soldier speaks. "Your contributions are an honor to Alexander. You are the foundation of the future." You think, if the future is built on sweat, blood, and worn-out sandals, then we're living in a temple of ash. You return home, exhausted. The red cloth sign on your door is still there. Faded, the writing blurred, barely showing the words, "Survivor type." You don't know if it's a warning, a title, or a joke, but you know one thing. Tomorrow, you'll still have to pay something. If not with rice, then with labor. If not with labor, then with time. And if you have nothing left, then with yourself. In Alexander's empire, tax isn't money. It's proof you no longer belong to yourself. You're a walking debt, a flesh and blood reminder that victory doesn't end on the battlefield. It continues in the ledgers, and in every step you drag back home, with torn sandals and a soul just as tattered. There's one thing you never thought you'd miss. The rickety outhouse teetering behind the garden, with its rotting wooden door, straw walls, and unmistakable smell. But then, it was burned. Not because anyone hated it, because the soldiers needed firewood. And in this era of rebuilding civilization, anything that can burn becomes fuel, even the one place you had some privacy. Since that day, going to the bathroom is no longer a personal act. It's a survival contest. At first you tried digging a pit, but the soldiers said, "That area's for spear practice." You moved behind the well, but the soldiers came, saying, "This is for the captain's horses." Finally, you and a few others retreat to an overgrown garden, where the grass reaches your knees and flies could hold a convention. Flies. The new kings, they swarm like living clouds, buzzing like a choir, awaiting its cue. They cling to your skin, your food, every unhealed wound. And especially, they claim your makeshift bathroom as their palace. No paper, no water, no place to step without fearing you'll tread on something. Every morning you carry a stick, not for support, but to shoo flies. An old man tells you, "If there's a next life, I want to be reborn as a fly." They have homes, food, and no taxes. You don't know whether to laugh or nod. One day, you sneak into the barracks, where the soldiers have their own latrine. Just a deep pit with 2 planks across. You think, just once. But the soldiers catch you. They don't beat you, they laugh. Then they make you clean their facility, with your bare hands as punishment for trespassing on military sanitation property. You return home with trembling hands, not from pain, but from the smell. Children go wherever they can, not out of carelessness, because no one's left to teach them where it's allowed or not. A child squats behind Alexander's statue, gets caught, ears pulled, scolded. Don't defile the great man. His mother kneels, apologizing, not out of fear, but because yesterday her house was marked lacking in obedience. Water is scarce, the well is drying up, shared by soldiers and horses. People start fetching water from the river, but the river holds everything: battle blood, dead fish, and things better left unnamed. Those who drink it get diarrhea, fever, or worse, don't wake up. An old woman whispers, under Darius, water was a blessing. Under Alexander, it's a test. You try building a small outhouse behind your house, with branches, mud, and hope. But then a rainy night comes. By morning, it's melted like promises of tomorrow. You return to the overgrown garden, stick in hand, flies in your hair, and your dignity left somewhere among the roots. People get creative: clay boxes, wooden buckets, shared pits. But the soldiers complain about the smell. They order activities unfit for Greek civilization, moved outside the city. Non-compliance earns you the label, unsanitary. And so, every afternoon, a long line of people trudges to a distant field, hoping this time it doesn't rain and the flies don't throw a banquet. One day, you hear someone say, an empire's capital, with no place to relieve yourself, is just a sewer with flags. You don't dare repeat it, but you mutter it in your head every time you step into the soggy grass and wince as a fly buzzes into your nose. You used to dream of honey cakes, soft beds, autumn festivals. Now you dream of a place with 3 walls and a lid. No throne, no light of civilization, just a fenced pit and quiet, something the flies haven't taken yet. In post-conquest Halicarnassus, you no longer ask, who am I? You ask, where can I go? And is someone already there? And if you're lucky, you'll find a path far enough, a bush thick enough, and a brief moment to feel still human. Then you stand, swat flies, grab your stick, and head home, hoping tomorrow will be less hot, spatey, and the flies will nap. Though you know they never sleep, they stay awake, and they rule. This morning, you're woken by the sound of a horse kicking the wall, and soldiers yelling at someone to get up and cook. That someone is you, not because you're a chef, because you're the last one still conscious in the unpaid barracks support crew. You crawl up from the mat spread on the dusty floor, eyes stinging from last night's kitchen smoke, and the moldy smell now sunk into your skin. You don't feel hungry, you feel empty. Not the "oh, I haven't had breakfast" kind, but the "I'm not sure I still exist biologically" kind. Then, your stomach protests. It growls like a cruel reminder that despite everything, your body still demands fuel. You step into the kitchen, or what used to be a kitchen, where there was once an oven, a copper pot, and a corner where your mother kept a jar of honey. Now there's just a cracked clay basin, a half-burned log, and a spoon bent like your spirit. You reach for the jar with the last bit of rice, pour it into your hand. Moldy, not just moldy, but something's crawling. You pick out the crawling bits, close your eyes, and rinse the rest in water. Water you fetched from the well yesterday. Water that smells of metal and dead snails. You light the fire. The wind blows. Smoke goes straight into your eyes. You rub them with ash-covered hands. Then sneeze. A horse startles. One bellows. Soldiers yell again. You clench your teeth. Not from pain, because your mouth still tastes of yesterday's porridge. Porridge mixed with sand and tiny pottery shards from a broken bowl. The porridge is done. No aroma, no color, just a watery, murky, thick sludge like diluted mud after rain. You scoop it with half a seashell, your military spoon since the real one was taken by soldiers for a fight. You carry the bowl, if you can call it that, to the porch. Sit. The wind blows. Flies buzz. One lands on the porridge's edge. You don't shoo it. It needs to eat too. You sigh. Take a spoonful. Chew without chewing. It feels like swallowing dirt. Some rice grains are still whole, hard as pebbles. Something is unnaturally soft. You don't dare ask what. You swallow. Not because it's good, because if you don't, you won't have the strength to carry water for the barracks today. And if you don't carry, the soldiers will replace you with someone more grateful. Nearby, a child eats porridge too. He doesn't speak, just looks at you. His eyes are big, black, and empty, like the pot you cooked in this morning. He hands you a small stone, saying, "Yesterday, I thought this was a bean." You don't laugh, but you nod. These days, stones are easier to mistake for food than you'd think. An old woman sits nearby, breaking dry bread baked from moldy wheat flour mixed with hearth ash, hard enough to be a weapon if needed. She says, in her youth, she ate almond pastries. Now her teeth are gone, and the pastries have no almonds, just a filling. Humiliation. You hear whispers, a distribution's coming. A cart of supplies from the command center is due, but it's a rumor. For 3 days, you've heard the rumor. 3 days where distribution meant soldiers trading 5 bowls of porridge for a child who can clear weeds. A man in the group tried to cook something different. He mixed roots, a pinch of salt, and weeds. The result smelled like ripe garbage. The soldiers tasted it, spat it out, and forced him to eat it all, for daring to deceive the army. He ate. Each bite was like swallowing the shame of the entire city into his stomach. You look at your nearly empty bowl of gruel. At the bottom is a small piece of pottery, perhaps from the jug that once held your family's goat milk. You quietly pick it out, wipe it, and slip it into your pocket. Not because it's valuable, but because it's the last remnant of something that was once family. The trumpet sounds, the start of labor hours. You stand up, stomach not full, mouth without taste, but you go, because there's no choice. And you think, if there's one thing that truly unites all civilizations, it's not philosophy, mythology, or law. It's that whether you're in Halicarnassus or Babylon, living under Darius or Alexander, in the end, your breakfast is still a bowl of thin, cold gruel, filled with things you don't dare name. You step out from the porch, empty bowl, heavy stomach, mind blurred, and you know tomorrow you'll eat the same. If you're lucky, if there's still grain, if there's still water, if there's still someone who cares enough not to take the pottery shard you just tucked away. You know a city is dying when you start counting more corpses than loaves of bread, and Halicarnassus, once a bustling trade port, is now an open graveyard. No warning bells, no physicians sounding alarms. The plague doesn't come in armor, doesn't ride a horse. It arrives quietly, hidden in wounds, in dirty water, in a cough not covered in time. You realize something's wrong when a young man collapses in the street, right beside the pile of rubble you and the labor group are clearing. At first, people think he fainted from hunger, but then another falls, then a child, then an old woman, washing vegetables by the well. No one knows the name of the disease, because no one has medical words left. Only pale skin, dull eyes, swollen stomachs, and then silence. Rumors spread faster than the disease. Some say it's a curse from gods whose temples were destroyed. Others say foreigners brought germs in their rice sacks. Some whisper, this is the consequence of taking everything from this land. But whispers don't cure fever, and reasons don't stop death. Corpses start piling up behind the old market. The place that once sold fennel seed bread is now where flies gather in thick black clouds. No one can bury them all. Digging requires people. People are sick. Those still standing are exhausted, or cooking gruel for the soldiers. You're ordered, with a few others, to burn the bodies. No questions, no tears, just do it. Each time you lift a limp body, you tell yourself, don't think this was someone you knew. Don't remember their eyes, their voice, or their familiar smell. Treat it like carrying a log, an object, something to be dealt with. In your group is a girl named Talia, young, dark-skinned, always smiling. Yesterday, she joked with you that the ashes of the elderly could fertilize crops. Today, she coughs. A lot. Her eyes are red, her skin pale, her voice a whisper. If I don't wake up tomorrow, don't let the crows eat me. You nod, throat tight. The soldiers start setting up a clean zone, where they sleep. The people are pushed out, forced to find their own shelter. The sick are isolated, no medicine, just ropes tied to house posts, and a guard standing 2 meters away with a spear raised. Patients are left there until they're quiet, forever. A woman tries to sneak into the barracks to beg for cloth, to wipe her son's nose. She's beaten. She screams. He's just a child, the soldier replies. Then he'll die even easier. You don't know what hurts more, the death or watching it unfold like an administrative procedure. The well water grows murky. Some say it's contaminated, but beyond it, there's only the river. And the river smells foul, and sometimes has bodies floating. You scoop water, filter it through cloth, boil it, but then you hear that steam might carry the disease. So, what do you breathe? Talia doesn't wake up. You and another carry her behind the house. She says nothing, only tears fall. Her hand grips yours, weak as a thread. An hour later, she stops breathing. You cover her with a piece of cloth, the one you meant to keep as a headscarf. Now it's a shroud. You place her in a shallow grave behind the house, beside 3 others. No one recites prayers, no one lights incense, just you, a shovel, and a whispered promise. I'll remember your name, if I can still remember my own. The soldiers start handing out plague charms, bronze plaques with Greek letters worn around the neck. Those who wear them are protected by civilization. Those who don't are potentially dangerous in terms of bacteriology. No one says what the charms do, but wearing one gets you gruel first. A group gathers to pray at night. The soldiers catch them, call it superstitious gathering during curfew. Punishment: hauling horse manure all day. The group's leader says, "At least horse dung is real." You sleep little. Each time you doze, you dream of the dead calling your name. In the morning, you secretly write Talia's name on an old tile, placing it where she lay. The writing is crooked, faint, but it's better than nothing. One day, you hear a bell, not an alarm, not a command trumpet. It's a bell someone hung to count the deaths. Each day it rings, once, then twice, then 3 times, then too many to count. You don't know where the plague started, nor when it will end, but you know one thing: when people die like flies, and flies live like kings, every system of civilization, every title of empire, every praise of Alexander the Great, all meaningless. And you know this, as the wind blows through the freshly dug graves behind the house, carrying the smell of ash, earth, and the silent scent only places that once held voices can create. They say Alexander was not just a warrior, but a bringer of peace. No one clarifies what kind of peace, for whom, and whether it requires burning a city to achieve it. After the slaughter subsides, after the looting pauses, after the plague takes those too weak to survive, Halicarnassus enters the phase the soldiers call stability. The people call it dying slowly without noise. The first day of Greek peace begins with soldiers posting a notice on the wall of the old temple, now a spear storage. Henceforth, Halicarnassus is a satellite city of the Macedonian Greek Cultural Alliance. All resistance has ended. Civilization begins. At the bottom is an engraving of Alexander holding a globe, looking like Zeus just patented himself. You read the notice, understanding half the words. Their phrasing is clever: erasing outdated local structures, =, destroying everything old, reallocating manpower, =, forcing people to work without asking, encouraging soft religious conversion, =, dismantling your household altar and replacing it with a smug Apollo statue. That afternoon, a community education center is established. You feel a flicker of hope, but it's old man Parios's warehouse, now with a sign: Academy of Greek Language and Etiquette, skip class, and you're marked lacking integration enthusiasm, meaning no moldy morning gruel. You go, of course, sit with kids, learning to write alpha, beta, while the Greek teacher smiles. You have potential, just forget the rest. In the first week, they rebuild the central square, not for people to gather, but to erect a 3-story statue of Alexander, hand pointing east, as if summoning wind or more territory. Around it are guards, fake flowers, and a plaque: Father of Peace. You look at the statue's face, no emotion, no eyes, just a stone carved into glory. And you're what's cleared away, to make room for that glory. Small things start getting new names. The path to the river, now New Greek Boulevard. The ancient well, civilized water station. Even the cemetery entrance, evolutionary memorial zone. Everything has a new name, except you. You're just commoner class 2, eastern outskirts. That evening, you see a procession carrying an altar into a new temple. On it are cakes, wine, flags embroidered with Alexander's face. They sing, not lullabies, but victory chants mixed with coercion. You don't understand the words, but the tune feels like a forced triumph. A child asks you, "What's this ceremony?" You want to say, "We're being occupied." But you whisper, "It's a kind of wedding, between freedom and someone who didn't ask the bride." The next day, a civilized market opens. You hope for food, but it's where soldiers barter: a pair of sandals for 2 days' labor, a bowl of gruel for snitching on someone who didn't study. You walk past, not stopping. You have nothing to trade, except memories, and those are now labeled hazardous baggage. One day you hear heavy breathing behind a wall.
Makes me think someone's being beaten.
But it's a man lying face down, sobbing. He mutters, "What kind of peace makes you feel guilty for remembering your son speaking Persian?" You want to comfort him, but realize you don't dare speak your mother tongue in the street anymore. You start using Greek words for food, directions, even calling your cat Themis to avoid questions. A group tries to secretly hold a harvest festival. No drums, no flags, just a small group eating together, talking about old times. They're caught. The soldiers don't beat them. They make them wear theatrical costumes, stand in the square, and read a script, thanking Alexander for freeing their minds from agricultural superstition. You can't look, not out of fear, but shame for how they're turned into justification for the theft of their own festival. Night falls, and the city is lit by torches placed around the monument. Light smoke, light wind, and you sit alone by a crumbled wall. Where there once were carvings of the god Mithra, now there are only cracks. You think, this is peace, but not the kind you hoped for. This is a controlled silence, a pause between two population censuses. You hear footsteps, not running, not panicked, just the sound of familiar people passing through a city no longer theirs. Someone coughs, someone mutters lessons, someone forces a laugh for surviving, and you breathe, labored, soft, smelling of ash, carrying the sound of someone not yet daring to cry. This is Halicarnassus in the era of Greek peace. No more fighting, only losing, and you wonder when all language, memory, customs, and even anger have been replaced by stone statues and slogans. Is what remains still called peace, or simply a deeper surrender? You once thought school was where people learned to read, write, and become human. In Halicarnassus, after Alexander brought light, the new school is where you learn to forget who you were. It's not in the old temple, not in an ancient stone lecture hall. It's set in an old donkey stable, walls patched with army tarps, desks made from wood taken from people's homes, and a blackboard scratched with charcoal. Each morning, the teacher writes, "I am a child of the empire. Alexander is the light." You don't choose to attend, but skipping means being listed as unintegrated in thought. 3 strikes, and you're sent to the educational punishment labor team, cleaning horse manure for philosopher soldiers. So you go, every day, sitting among children, elders, youths, and even those who were once teachers in the old days. The teacher is a young Greek, tall, pale-faced, hair curled like a less muscular Apollo statue. He smiles constantly, speaks softly, words precise, always starting with "We are lucky to learn." Here, lucky means not beaten. First lesson, the Greek alphabet.
No one mentions Persian script.
Old carvings are whitewashed. Those who ask about local symbols are told that script is hard to remember, unsystematic, unfit for reason. Reason is what you must have to avoid asking forbidden questions. Second lesson, history, not yours, the empire's. You learn Alexander defeated, disorganized armies, and freed cities from vague ways of life. You lived in that city. You remember lanterns, honey cakes, Mithra's statue in the square, but in the book, it's called a blind spot of civilization. You note in your mind, the blind spot wasn't from lack of light, but from being burned away. Children learn fast. They recite Homer's lines loudly, draw empire maps, color Greek armor. They memorize new gods, rituals, and the slogan, "Knowledge is obedience." A girl who once sang Persian hymns now stands in class, singing Alexander's victory song in a language of unclear origin. She sings like a parrot, but her eyes, cold as stone. The teacher asks you, "Do you know who Herodotus is?" You say he was a historian from Halicarnassus. He laughs. Wrong. He was a Greek living in the wrong place. You don't know how to react. You heard your mother read Herodotus's tales of Persian kings, but now his books only have parts about Greece, the rest torn out, burned, or worse, rewritten. One day, the teacher assigns an essay. Write your thoughts on living under Alexander's reign. Those who write long, flowery, praise-filled essays get a fig. Those who write short, lacking joy, stand for the whole lesson. Those who write the truth are called out privately. You don't write, you draw. An arm holding a book, its middle pages ripped out. No one understands, no one asks. You're glad for that. An old man, once a teacher of the old script, sits in the corner, not holding a pen. When asked to speak, he says, "I've forgotten how to read." His voice is hoarse, eyes dry. A child laughs. The teacher doesn't. He just writes something in his notebook. The next day, the old man doesn't return to class. At home, you search the ashes for a scrap of paper with an old Persian poem. You once knew it by heart. Now it feels foreign. Some lines you've forgotten. Some you're not sure ever existed. You hide it under a brick, not sure anyone will find it. The next day, a boy sitting beside you in class whispers, "My father says, don't learn too fast." Those who forget quickly are also easily replaced. You look at him, unsure what to say, but you understand some things shouldn't be understood too loudly. Week 4, the class holds a civilization day. Everyone must share a true memory of how Alexander changed their life. You talk about getting a new book. You don't mention your old book was burned first. Everyone claps. No one knows who they're clapping for. Maybe Alexander, maybe your ability to lie at the right moment. And so, each day, you learn a new Greek letter, a new god's name, a new way to recount the past without landing in the punishment book. But at the same time, you forget a flavor, an old word, a song your mother sang while washing your hair by the well. The new school teaches that knowledge is a tool. But you start to see, if you're not careful, it's also a chain. It binds you with beautiful words, logic, and reason, so flawless, it leaves no room for doubt. And one day, when you realize you can't recall your old teacher's name, you understand this school isn't built on land. It's built on your memories, plowed, sown, and harvested. You still go to class, still read, still memorize, but at night, you whisper to yourself in the old tongue, haltingly, uncurly, unheard, just to remind yourself you were something before they made you become something else. It starts with a head, not a human one, thankfully, but the head of a statue of Mithra, the ancient god, protector of Halicarnassus, rolled off its pedestal, broken into 3 pieces, lying before the temple steps, like an abandoned melon. No one says who did it, but everyone knows it's a signal. And the next day, the signal becomes an order. A troop of Greek soldiers brings new statues, larger, shanaia, carved from white stone, imported from the west. They erect Apollo in the square, place Athena at the slope to the market, and Zeus, there must be Zeus, stands before the old Mithra temple, hand raised as if proclaiming, "You may keep the land, but I'll take your faith." These statues, to be fair, are masterpieces. Every muscle, every beard strand, every stone fold, carved so perfectly, you feel you should bow. And then, they tell you to do exactly that. That morning, the people are summoned to the square. A new priest, in a white robe with green trim, holding a staff carved with a sun symbol, speaks, henceforth, the unified Greek Macedonian Empire will share one pantheon. Each region may honor its old culture, as long as it aligns with the new symbols. Everyone knows what it means. You can remember your old gods, in your mind, your heart, your dreams, but before the new statues, you bow. You bow. Everyone bows. No one wants to be the one standing when the whole square bends. An old woman near you whispers, "The new gods aren't at fault, but those who make us abandon the old ones are." You don't dare reply, but you remember her words, clearer than the Greek prayers you just learned. From that day, every ritual changes. The first day of the week is now Light Day. For Apollo, children learn a new song. He is the flame, the sun's eye, the reason within us. Those keeping old statues at home must surrender them for safekeeping. At the Belief Archive, that place, rumor says, is behind the granary, where rats hold their own ceremonies. You once had a small altar with a clay Mithra statue, carved by your father when you were 7. Now the altar is gone, the statue taken. You kept the base, a small stone with ancient script. You hide it in a wall nook behind the kitchen, where horses can't poke their heads, where soldiers won't think to look. One day, in class which you're still forced to attend, The teacher declares old beliefs are ignorance. New beliefs are awakening. A student raises a hand. If the ancients were wrong, how did they survive until now? The teacher doesn't answer. He just looks at the child and writes their name on the needs further guidance list. A month later, the new temple is inaugurated. No gongs, no incense. Just Greek bronze drums, fragrant oils, and rituals in a language you still mispronounce. People are given small flags with Athena seated on a throne holding a spear. Those who don't wave, sing, or smile are noted. You try to smile, but a smile with lips doesn't warm your hands. Some secretly hold old rituals at night. A young mother lights a candle, places wheat cakes before a rock nook, whispering old prayers for her sick child. She's caught, not arrested. But the next day, her house is removed from the food ration list. No one says why, but everyone understands. You meet an old man, once a priest of Mithra's temple. Now he hauls water for the barracks. You ask, do you still believe? He smiles, whispers, belief doesn't need soil to grow. It sprouts in your head. He taps his temple. This is my new temple. No one can smash it. You return home, sit by the ashen hearth, and quietly write an old incantation on a pottery shard. Light comes from within, not from statues. Then you hide it under a loose brick, not because you believe it will save anyone, but because you don't want to forget there was once another way to believe. One day, you pass by the statue of Zeus. A strong wind blows, shaking the tarp covering it. You pause. You don't bow. You just stand. A soldier sees, frowns. You bow immediately, but for a moment you think, if gods are light, why does the statue need a tarp to shield it from rain? That night, you dream of standing between two temples. One holds Mithra, warm red fire. The other holds Athena, cold marble. You don't choose, you turn away. And when you wake, you know in this empire, choosing nothing is also a crime. So you bow, every time you pass a statue. Every time there's a soldier. Every time eyes are watching. But at night, you touch the old brick behind the kitchen, and you think, if you can still remember the old god's name, if you can still whisper a prayer in a voice soft as breath, then you haven't been entirely conquered. You live in a world where they rename gods, like they rename streets, calling it thought evolution. But you know, deep beneath the bricks, beyond the smoke, under every bough, there's memory. And sometimes, memory is the strongest prayer. It's called the Cultural Harmony Festival. Flags hung, wine distributed, music played, speeches given, thick bread baked from Persian wheat, but sprinkled with Greek sesame. And at the center of it all, marriage, not for love, not by choice, but by policy. Alexander's cultural assimilation policy. Marry locals, so they feel accepted. You're invited, meaning your name is called from a list, to participate in a social bonding program between local citizens and empire warriors. It sounds like a community event, but it's really about being introduced to a young, healthy soldier who doesn't know your name. Your name? No one asks. They just call you by the number pinned to your chest. Female resident, Group C, marriageable age, unmarried, no record of resistance. You think no resistance? Does enduring all this time count as an achievement? The ceremony takes place in the square, under Alexander's statue. Of course, nothing says love like the presence of a conqueror on horseback, sword in hand. Hundreds are paired off. One side locals, the other soldiers. Soldiers choose, locals enjoy the new opportunity. You're paired with Nicandros, a tanned Macedonian soldier, scruffy beard, eyes always scanning for enemies rising from the earth. He sniffs you once, nods, fine, not as smelly as yesterday's. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a quantitative assessment. The marriage is conducted with a simple ritual. Share a cup of watered-down wine, stand side by side as a priest recites blessings in Greek, then sign a tablet. No one translates the blessings. You catch words like harmony, empire, reproductive duty. In the end, you and Nicandros are declared a level 1 mixed marriage unit. What's level 1? You don't know. Maybe the lowest, maybe experimental. Back home, you're home, since Nicandros has none. He takes the bed. You sleep by the kitchen corner, no curtain, no lamp, just an odd silence. He asks, can you cook any Greek dishes? You say no. He nods. Good. I hate comparisons. The next day you're given a cloth with a laurel wreath emblem. Marriage token. Wear it. and you're exempt from some labor, but you must attend community development events, meaning ceremonies, meaning parades, meaning standing beside your husband as living proof that victors and vanquished can live happily ever after. Nicandros doesn't hit you, doesn't scold, doesn't curse. He also doesn't hug, doesn't ask, doesn't smile. You live under one roof, sleeping in opposite corners. Sometimes he talks about battlefields, India, rivers, elephants, but his voice is distant, like he's speaking to someone who doesn't exist. You listen, nod, not out of care, but to avoid being listed as an unfriendly wife. A neighbor, bonded to a soldier named Theon, isn't so lucky. She's forced to memorize Greek poems and beaten for misreading. One day, she runs. She's caught, not executed, but sent to the Temple Foundation digging team. You try not to remember, but the harder you try, the more persistent the memories are, like the smell of ash. You pass by the old market corner, still recalling the calls for bean cakes, though now that stall is where they hang new religious flags. You see a young man tie a red cord around his neck against regulations, and he's arrested for anti-intellectual attire. That cord was once a symbol of protection on full moon nights. Now it's evidence of a crime. One night, someone knocks on your door. A woman, hair disheveled, hands trembling. Do you still remember how to make turnip soup with ginger? You look at her, not daring to answer, but you hand her an old piece of paper, the writing faded. She cries, says, "Thank you for not forgetting." The next morning, you burn the paper, not out of fear, but out of pity. Memory now is a flame. Keep it, and you'll burn. Some start speaking in metaphors. The bird without a nest has flown west. The old season hasn't died, only sleeps. The deep well still holds its old taste. These sayings aren't banned, because no one understands them, but you do, and it hurts. When you must speak of the past in secret codes, it means the past has been killed. Someone draws an old god on a stone, tiny fingertip-sized, and is arrested. The charge, unauthorized drawing of unapproved content. You saw the drawing, just once, before soldiers chiseled it away, but in your mind, it lingers, and you start redrawing it in your memory, every night, before sleep. No one sees, but it exists. You realize they don't just want your obedience, they want you to forget why you ever resisted. They don't want you silent, they want you without words, without concepts, without a foundation to tell your story. A boy asks you, before Alexander, was the city like this? You want to say yes, that it had festival lanterns, night markets, music, but you swallow the words. You say different, but now, just remember this. You don't say what, just look at him, and hope he understands. Some days you pass the new god's statues, bowing like everyone else, but inside, you whisper old names, Ahura, Mithra, Anahita. Each name is a murmur against collective forgetting, not to defy the soldiers, but to defy yourself, the part of you fading from fear. You live like this, remembering in silence, breathing without repeating, smiling on cue, not crying where ears might hear. And each night, you touch the ground where the wooden box is hidden. It can't save anyone, but it helps you remember you were a person, with a mother, with rituals, with songs. Before memory became a crime, before you were forced to live without permission to know you had lived. You realize one day, the conqueror doesn't need to stay to keep ruling. He only needs to leave statues. And Alexander, who swept through Halicarnassus like a cloaked storm, left this city long ago, but his statues remain, and they watch you. Every morning, you wake, rise from the tattered mat by the door, head still clouded by a nameless dream. Then you turn, as always, and see that face, stone, cold, unmoving, unweathered by rain or wind. The statue of Alexander, the 39th official one in the city, placed at the street's end, at the fork to the market, but angled precisely toward your door. Deep carved stone eyes, straight nose, wavy hair, lips that never smile. You don't know who designed the statue's angle. Maybe an Alexandrian architect, maybe a soldier with an eye for art and surveillance. But you know one thing, everywhere you go, market, well, classroom, gruel station, public latrine, there's at least one statue of Alexander, each different on horseback, standing tall, head raised, sword drawn, holding a map, some too large to ignore, some small, just enough to slip into your subconscious, like a visual habit. They call it the idle presence policy. Sounds like a ritual, but it's a calculation. The number of times you see Alexander daily, equal sign, the number of times you're reminded of the power of the one who's gone. People grow used to it. Each morning, everyone bows passing the nearest statue, not out of reverence, but habit and fear. Once a boy playing ran into a statue's base without bowing. A nearby soldier saw, dragged him to the Faith Reformation room. When he returned, he didn't speak, only drew Alexander's face in the dirt, then erased it, as if apologizing. You tried turning your back once, passing a statue in a narrow alley, just once, but an old woman saw, coughed softly, shook her head, and whispered, "Don't do that. Walls have ears, stone eyes have mouths." You didn't ask whose ears, whose mouths, but from then on, you turned back, and bowed. One day, someone climbed the grandest statue in the square, the tallest, shiniest, and drew a charcoal slash across its face. Protest or prank, no one knew. But by afternoon, a curfew was imposed. 3 people arrested, the statue cleaned, the charcoal left a faint stain, like a blemish. No one dared name. You meet a stonecutter, back bent, hands calloused, who says, "I used to carve Mithra statues, now, just Alexander." You ask, "Is it different?" He scratches his head, replies, "Yes, I carved Mithra to warn those who looked up. Alexander, I carve so no one dares speak rebellion." One day, you pass a statue in blazing sunlight. Its reflection blinds you. Will you close your eyes briefly? In that moment, you imagine not seeing that face. Imagine an empty square, a place where no one has to perform. But then you open your eyes, and the stone face is still there, unlost, unsmiling, unforgiving. You think Alexander left, not because he was done, but because he didn't need to stay. People have memorized his name. Children write poems praising him. Adults offer wine at his feet. The dead are buried under slabs marked Alexander's era. His absence doesn't matter. The system he built runs itself, smoothly, efficiently, without his hand. You once asked a guard, "Is he still alive?" He smirked. "Alexander doesn't need to live. He's an idea." You nod. An idea, undying, unaging, needing no permission to bow. That night, you dream you're alone in the square, and every Alexander statue turns to you at once, eyes glowing, lips moving, saying nothing specific. But you understand, we are proof you're no longer yours. You wake, cold sweat, heart racing, moonlight spilling through the door crack, landing on the stone face outside. The next morning, you place a pebble on the statue's base by your house. Not a flower, not an offering, just a mark, a small way to say you see, you know, you remain. You lack the strength to topple statues, the words to convince others, but you have memory, and memory is the one thing stone can't force you to forget. The city lives on, under statue shadows, in stone gazes. Each day, people work, learn, eat, breathe, under the sleepless eyes of the one who left. And you, each morning, pass that face. You bow, but each time, you whisper an old name, a prayer in a banned tongue, a sound so small, lost in dust and footsteps, that even if the statue heard, it could only stay silent, because Alexander is gone, but you're still here, still living, and that, sometimes, is the last rebellion. You no longer remember the last time you spoke a full sentence in Persian, maybe last month, maybe last year, maybe in a dream, because now, all you hear, when awake, is Greek, everywhere, 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 every sentence. It seeps into every ear, flows into every brain, mixes into thoughts before they form. You're at the market, once alive with haggling in your native tongue, when a man shouts, "Ela, Somi, Edwa, come, bread here." You turn, nod, but your reflex is to reply in Persian. You open your mouth. Nothing comes out, not because you forgot, but because you're afraid. One wrong word, one mispronounced consonant, is enough to draw stares, or worse, your name recorded. You start dreaming in your mother tongue. In dreams, everything is right. You call your mother Mada, count bread as yek, do, say, whisper old gods' names. No one stops you. No one watches. In dreams, you're still you. But when you wake, it's to Greek. Guards changing shifts. Children reciting the Iliad. Vendors shouting nushamates friska, fresh tomatoes, and the bell from Alexander's monument signaling gruel time. You open your eyes in a language not yours. A language you don't hate, but didn't choose. One morning, you hum a faint old tune, a children's counting song in Persian. A child passing by hears, repeats it. His mother, terrified, clamps his mouth, pulls him away like fleeing a flood. You watch, seeing her eyes like a mirror, angry, afraid, remembering. You return home, open the small chest hidden under the floor. Inside is a cloth embroidered with your name in old Persian script. You touch it, like touching your own skin. The skin stripped, layer by layer through corrected words, learned letters, renamed dishes. You want to read it aloud, but you don't dare, because walls have ears. An old friend, once a teacher, tells you language is the backbone of memory. We're being broken. He says it in a low, quiet voice, adding, and the scariest part is when we help them break it. You nod, because you don't know what else to do. Children no longer know the old tongue. They learn from new textbooks, write in new letters, pronounce in new ways. When you try to teach your niece an old lullaby, she interrupts. Auntie, that's wrong now. Wrong. No. Just no longer recognized. One night, you dream of standing between two doors. One opens to Persian, the smell of bread, calls for father, morning greetings. The other to Greek, poetry books, school, the low voices of guards. Both doors are open. You step through the right. When you look back, the left is gone. The next morning, you wake with a Persian sentence on the tip of your tongue, but it won't come out. It sticks in your throat, like an unburned speck of ash, lingering, uncomfortable. You cough, not from illness, but because memory is trying to escape your body, and it's choked back. At a gruel distribution, a soldier announces, those who can read, speak, and write Greek will get priority rations. An old man asks softly, what about those who once wrote poetry in Persian? The question goes unanswered. He's reassigned to the northern guard post. No one sees him again. You start keeping a mental diary, in the old tongue. Every night, before sleep, you recite simple lines. Who I am. I lived here once. I had a name. No one hears. No one forbids it. But you know if you stop, you'll forget. And to forget right now is to die slowly. One day, there's a contest for empire-praising composition. You don't join. But you read a winning entry, written in Greek, lauding Alexander as the one who erased language borders. You think true, but he didn't just erase borders, he erased the map, and you now live among crossroads, with no old names. Taverns once serving traditional dishes now offer cacaviar. Children call their grandfathers papas. You don't hate them, you just feel lost. You dream more. In dreams, you speak fluently. You sing. You call your father's name. You cry hearing Coda Hafez, goodbye, but then you wake, and don't dare whisper it again. Squan, morning you stand before a mirror, looking into your own eyes, and ask silently, if I forget Persian, am I still me? The question has no answer, only silence, the last language the empire hasn't banned. You step into the street, pass Alexander's statue, bow, say Kalimera, good morning, and in your heart, you repeat a sentence in your mother tongue, like an exorcism. I still remember, because in a world where language has been replaced, only memory knows who you are. And sometimes, surviving isn't keeping your body alive. It's keeping a few sentences, a few syllables, a few breaths, untranslated. It comes on a windy morning, as you stand in line for water at a half-dry well. A strange trumpet sounds from the barracks, not a fire alarm, not the usual muster call. The sound is high, sharp, cold as a blade across your spine. Everyone falls silent. A woman pouring water drops her jug. It shatters into 4 pieces. No one bends to pick them up. An officer rides into the square on horseback. Behind him, 2 soldiers carry wooden boards, moving house to house. They don't call names, they plant stakes, tying red cloth to doors. A red cloth means someone inside is called to serve in glory. They don't say conscription, They call it an order to join the strategic integration process. But everyone knows it's when you're taken from home, dressed in armor, handed a shield, though you've never been taught to block a blow. Your name is on the list, not because you're strong, not because you volunteered, but because you're in the age group capable of endurance. A young soldier smirks as he hands you the order. We need people who don't die easily. You look like you'll last. You don't know if it's a compliment or a threat. You're given a leather-lined cloth tunic, boots that don't fit, and a shield larger than you. When you try holding it, your hands shake, not from the weight, but because it's the first time you've held something not to serve others, but to save your own life. Training starts that afternoon. No introductions, just shouts, wooden sticks, people falling. You stand in a line with a dozen others, all civilians chosen like you. Some have never held a spear. Some were potters. Some buried a child from the plague last week. Now all wear the same tunic, called by numbers, and must learn to become part of the great ranks. Training doesn't teach you to fight. It teaches you not to die too quickly, how to not drop your shield in the first 3 steps, how to march in step when prodded with a stick from behind, how to look forward when the person beside you is trembling so much they wet themselves. Once you fall, a trainer kicks your shoulder, growls, "You're not a person, you're part of the formation." If you fall, the formation breaks. If the formation breaks, everyone dies. You don't ask, "What about me?" Day 3, you learn to hold a spear. Sharp tip, long shaft, heavy. Someone doesn't grip tightly. It pierces their foot. Blood flows. No one stops. Another soldier tosses them a rag, says, "Bandage it." 1 more hour till break. You ask the trainer, "If I die, who cares for my home?" He laughs. "If you die, your home will be honored as a sacrificial family, and your name will be on the honor list." You want to ask, "Is my name worth my blood?" But you know the answer. At night, you curl up under a canvas tent, hearing others breathe, cough, cry softly. Someone whispers, "What are we? Slaves in armor?" Another replies, "No, we're living proof of Alexander's unified multicultural army." No one laughs. One day, you're given a small cloth. They tell you to embroider your name on it, tie it to your spear's handle. So when you fall, they know who died. You hold the needle, trembling, stitching each red thread, a name you almost forgot because no one's called it in so long. At the end of the first week, there's a parade, not for battle, but for the city to see. A long line marches through the square. Each person holds a spear, shield, eyes forward. Children wave flags, adults bow, regular soldiers shout, "One empire, one glory." You whisper inside, "One fate, no choice." You don't think you'll fight anyone, don't know who to fight, but you know if ordered, you'll march to battle, because someone else wants you to prove an ideal you never understood. Someone in your group sneaks away, is caught, not executed, just tied outside the camp gate for 3 days, a sign reading, "Unfit for the great ideal." After the 3rd day he can't speak, but in his eyes, you see a look you won't forget, part regret, part freedom. You learn to sleep with your shield by your head, eat without removing boots, breathe without showing fear. Each morning you repeat the chant with others, "I am shield, I am spear, I am chosen." Faith, but inside you know you weren't chosen. You were just placed in line, and so you carry the shield, not to protect anyone, not to be a hero, but because surviving in an empire that denies you choice sometimes means holding whatever's thrust into your hand, even if it's sharp, cold, bears another's name, or worse, bears no name at all. The word resistance no longer appears in speech. It's not printed on paper, not written in poems, not whispered in the market. It's erased from the dictionaries taught in the civilized school, replaced with new terms like reintegration, positive thought reform, or demonstrating great admiration. But everyone knows, it's still there, silent, like a shadow. You once heard someone whisper a question, "If we don't agree, are we still human?" Another cut in quiet, "Walls don't hear, but soldiers do." Both of them, a week later, were sent to special re-education training. No one saw them again. In the city there are deaths, some from disease, hunger, cold, exhaustion. But there's another kind of death, sudden, bodiless, unannounced, without funerals. These are the deaths of those who spoke at the wrong time, raised their heads in the wrong place, wrote an unapproved line, or kept an unchecked image. Resistance doesn't need to be an act, just a thought made visible. Once you saw a small symbol, drawn in charcoal, at the base of Alexander's statue in the second square, an arrow pointing down, with tiny fingernail-sized words, "Not a god." By morning, the area was cordoned off, and people were summoned for faith reorientation. No one mentioned the symbol again, but you know someone dared to think, dared to write, if only for one night, and the price for that was disappearance. You knew someone, Arrows, the quietest person you ever met, never argued, never questioned, never laughed too loud. Yet one day, in class, he held up an empire map, pointed to a red mark, and said, "This was my village, now it's a barracks, but in my head, it's still a village." Just that, one sentence, 12 words. 3 days later, Arrows was called out during a special roll call. They said he was chosen for the mobile propaganda program. Everyone knows, no one returns from that program. You once dreamed you stood in a crowd, shouting in your mother tongue, "This isn't glory, this is a wound in a cloak." In the dream, you felt free. But when you woke, your hands were gripping the blanket so hard they bled. You never sleep soundly after dreams like that. Because you know, here, even dreaming can be punished if someone hears you talk in your sleep. Resistance can be keeping an old book, refusing to change your name. Lighting a candle on Mithra's birthday, though the flame is smaller than a guard's gaze. Closing your eyes during the Greek anthem. Staying silent when others shout praise the empire. But every small act can become a sentence. No court needed, just a nod from the list keeper. Once you saw a child draw in the dirt. A bird, wings spread wide. A soldier passed, leaned down, asked, "What's this?" The child answered, "Freedom." The soldier laughed. Later, the child was removed from the model citizen preparation class. No one saw them again. The bird was erased. By a soldier's boot, an older woman in your area kept a traditional mourning cloth. When soldiers searched her house, they asked, "What's this cloth for?" She said, "Dusting." They laughed. But that night, her house was ransacked. She disappeared. The next morning, word spread she'd been relocated to a rest facility. Everyone knows that's code for silence. Silence is the currency of survival. The more silence you have, the longer you live. But the cost is rotting memories, crumbling faith, the feeling that if you're still breathing, it's no longer you. You keep a strange habit. Every night, before sleep, you write a word in the dirt with your finger, then erase it. The word might be mother, freedom, my name, old. You don't keep any word, but your hand remembers, your skin remembers. And though no one reads it, you know you can still think differently. One day, a rumor spreads. Someone escaped the camp. Someone slipped past soldiers, fences, statues. No one knows if it's true, but for one day, the guards double, curfew tightens. Nighttime movement requires written reasons and signed approval. And you understand, it doesn't matter if the rumor is true, its mere existence makes the empire tremble. Because resistance, even just a thought, creates a tremor no 1,000-stone statues can quell. And so, you live on. You don't shout, don't write, don't argue. But you think, you stay quiet. You remember, and you know, in a world where every refusal is hanged as a traitor to the light, holding on to an unbowed thought is the highest resistance, even without banners, without songs. Even if the cost is you, they learn to write with their right hand and remember with their left. The right hand copies official lessons. Alexander is the light. Greece is the model. Obedience is civilization. The left hand secretly scratches into the damp earth behind the house. Poems their mothers sang, numbers in the old tongue, names erased from birth records. The children of Halicarnassus don't choose the world they grow up in. They're born between two layers of memory. One of the empire, thick with statues, festivals, and new textbooks. The other of their parents, whispered in kitchens, told more through eyes than words. You see them daily, running between Athena's temple and the crumbled wall of the old Mithra shrine, sitting in class reciting the Iliad, then returning home to scribble fire god names in mud and bamboo husk. Sometimes you see a child draw a sun with 8 rays, the old symbol, then cover it with a bird's wing from the new books. Not because they resist, but because they're trying to hold both worlds in their heads, though they don't know how to reconcile them. A child you know called Dara at home, but Dion in class asks you, if I remember my name the old way, is that wrong? You want to say, no, that's your real name. But you say, remember it, but don't say it loudly. He nods, then whispers his name like a secret code. In school, they learn the past is a collective delusion yet to be enlightened. They learn Greek math formulas, Alexander's history, names of Olympian gods. Those who write correctly, pronounce perfectly, answer well, get a fig, or worse, are paraded to praise the empire. Some smile, some fear, some look to their parents in the crowd, trying to guess if they've betrayed or been spared. Parents teach differently, not with lessons, but with living. They cook old dishes, whisper forbidden words, point to the night sky and name stars in the ancient tongue. When a child asks, why does school call that star Asterios, but father calls it Tishtria, they say, because a star has many names, but one light. The children nod, but their eyes carry an unhidden confusion. A child in class writes an essay. If Alexander is our father, who is our mother? The question isn't graded. The paper is torn. The child is sent to moral language orientation class. They don't ask again, but afterward, they often sit alone, carving a woman's image in the dirt, then erasing it. You start to see clearly, these children aren't just learning letters, they're learning to choose masks for each place. In class, they say honor. At home, they say preserve. In the street, they shout glory. In dreams, they call their grandmother by her true name. A girl you once cared for, now 9, asks, if I grow up knowing only half the truth, am I still me? You don't know how to answer. You just hold her, saying softly, who you are isn't in books, it's in what you choose to keep. One night, there's noise in the street. A group of children about 10 are stopped by soldiers for gathering outside permitted hours. They say they were playing memory relay, a new game. One tells an old story, the next retells it with different words, passing it on. Each round a variation, a way to keep memory alive without exact repetition, to avoid arrest. The soldiers disperse them, no beating, but the next morning, all classes hear the announcement. Uncontrolled memory leads to doubt. Remember correctly, or don't remember. You stand by the door, watching them go to school, hands holding slates, mouths reciting Greek, but their shirt backs bear small symbols, sewn in faint brown thread, understood only by family. One has a well, another a leaf, another a 6-pointed star, small as a grain of rice. The children of Halicarnassus don't have 2 lives, they have one, torn in half, one half to pass tests, the other to remember. And you can only hope that one day, when there are no statues guarding markets, no banned symbols, no loyalty orientation classes, those memory fragments will be pieced back together, in the right place, the right voice, the right name, and then, perhaps, that child, whether Dara or Dion, will stand and speak their chosen name loudly, and the whole city will hear, not because they're forced, but because, at last we've remembered who we were. You leave Halicarnassus on a foggy morning, with no one to see you off, no one asking where you're going, just you, an old cloth bag tied with rope, and footsteps unsure of their destination, only certain you can't stay. You're not escaping. You're permitted to relocate, for an official form stamped by an officer whose signature looks like a tilted snail. The reason? Resettlement for logistical needs, meaning you're allowed to leave because they don't need you anymore, or need your space for new soldiers. You pass through the square. Alexander's statue stands there, hand raised to the sky, face turned toward the sea, not waving, not blocking your path, just there. You bow out of habit, but this time no one watches. There's no reason to, yet you still bow, like a reflex rooted in your spine. At the city gate, a soldier checks your papers. One stares into your eyes for a long time, then exhales, reeking of cheap wine and antiseptic. Freedom's nice, he says, but don't say who gave it to you. You nod, not in agreement, but to keep him from holding back any more papers. You walk all day, past fields once rice paddies, now barren, dug up for temple stones, past abandoned guard posts, Alexander statues with broken faces, but still one eye staring straight. Each time you see a statue fragment, you feel called by name, not because stone speaks, but because memory hears. You've left the city, escaped the statues, soldiers, bands, but Alexander, the name, the image, the shadow, lives in the language people use, and how you guard your words, in how you purse your lips, seeing a red flag. And you understand sometimes conquerors don't just take land, they take memory. They take how you see the world. They brand their name invisibly on your palm, so no matter how many times you wash, it stings when you clench your fist, but you keep walking, step by step, farther. Each night, you write another line. Each morning, you smile at someone who doesn't know Alexander's name, and each time you tell a story, in a soft but true voice, Alexander shrinks a little inside you, until one day, maybe, you'll wake without seeing that statue in your dreams, and you'll know you didn't just leave the city, you left the empire. Freedom! The word still exists in the empire's official language. It's on signs, in propaganda, carved at Alexander's statue bases. Freedom! Through unity, light through obedience. It rings in speeches by Greek officials visiting conquered cities. We force no one. Every citizen has the right to live, work, move. But you know, allowed to move doesn't mean allowed to choose where, and allowed to live doesn't mean living for yourself. You left Halicarnassus, not forbidden, just controlled. Your travel permit has 5 lines: name, birthplace, reason for leaving, resettlement purpose, and a pledge not to spread unsuitable ideas. Short, cold, clean, no line for what you really think. I left because I couldn't bear another day under the statue's shadow. You arrive at a new village, thinking you're free. No trumpets, no forced classes, no one counting your bows. But then you see a sign at the entrance, autonomous region, under Alexander's civilized framework, and you understand the empire's freedom is a golden cage, no lock, because everyone's learned to guard the door themselves. You're allowed to speak, as long as you don't speak differently, to read, as long as the book's approved, to keep customs, as long as they're not labeled outdated, to choose work, as long as it serves the logistical system, to move, as long as it's the right direction. And if you don't know what's right, someone will teach you. In the village, an old man lives quietly at the hill's end. Each morning, he sits on his porch, sharpening stones and singing in an ancient tongue no one dares recognize. Some whisper, he was a Mithra temple elder. One night soldiers come, don't arrest him, just sit with him, drink wine. The next morning, he stops singing, only sharpened stones, in silence. You ask if he's okay. He says, I'm still free to sing, but I choose to sing inside. You work the fields with villagers. Each day starts with a ritual. Face the small statue in the field, bow, and say, for the empire's peace, I dedicate today. You bow, not because you believe, but to spare others trouble. A child forgets to bow. Their mother yanks their ear hard. The child cries. The mother tears up, not from anger, from fear. Someone tries rebuilding an ancestral altar. No one forbids it, but the next day, a notice arrives. Structure unfit for imperial aesthetics. Adjust accordingly. They dismantle it, rebuild with neutral images, flowers, mountains, a sun, no ancestor names, no sacred figures, just a wooden shelf. But everyone knows it's a nameless grave for the past. You're invited to an open culture festival, an event for communities to share traditions under the new framework. There, people dance old steps but sing new words, serve old dishes with Greek names. In the middle, someone reads a proclamation. We are free to preserve heritage, as long as it understands the new light. You clap. Everyone claps, but your hands shake, because you remember the old stringed lute, your mother's lullaby, not in the program. One day, you're given a survey. Do you feel free? Choose very free. Choose very free. Free enough, sometimes misunderstood, needs more guidance. No box for no. You pick. Free enough. The surveyor nods, says, thank you, model citizen. You no longer know what model means. That night, you go to the field, look at the sky. No statues there, just stars. You whisper in the old tongue, if freedom is looking straight at yourself, I'm still not there. Wind blows, grass sways. You're not punished, not caught, but you don't feel lighter. You start to understand, freedom isn't where you can go, but who you can be when you get there. In this empire, you can go far, as long as you stay still inside. Freedom, in Alexander's eyes, isn't choice. It's the ability to no longer need to choose. Everything's already chosen. You just step in line, breathe in rhythm, bow at the right angle. Any deviation is a mistake to be corrected. You live in a place with no prisons, but everyone carries an invisible lock on their chest, and the key hangs somewhere high, far, maybe on Alexander's statue. Or maybe you threw it away the first time you nodded and called it stability. And so, you go far, from Halicarnassus, old roads, the self you once were. But with each step, the statue's whisper follows. You're free, as long as you don't use it wrong. Alexander is dead, not a rumor, not a guess. Fact carved in stone, read in decrees, etched on bronze plaques in central squares of empire cities. Alexander the Great, bringer of civilized light, passed in glory at Babylon, but his light endures forever. People cry, not for him, for the truth. He's dead, and no one needs him to keep ruling. You read the notice from a messenger, purple cloak, voice flat as a grocery list. No sobs, no moment of silence, just a long passage on succession policies, maintained structures and the eternal civilized system. You listen, sit, and feel not quite relief, not pain, but emptiness. As if you woke and realized the nightmare of years no longer needs its dreamer to continue, because you understand Alexander no longer matters. He was just the beginning. The gears are already turning, the statues erected, the laws issued, the books printed, and the children have memorized the hymns of praise. Even his death has been turned into a tool, a reason to celebrate legacy, to carve more statues, to reinforce control. Right after news of his death, the soldiers raised 3 new statues, one of Alexander seated, hand pointing east, symbol of timeless vision, one holding an empire map, great legacy left to the world, and one with head raised, not smiling, not sad, representing immortality through ideals. His statues may die, but the ideals sprout like mushrooms after rain. You hear children sing, Alexander lives in our hearts. No need to breathe, no need to eat. He is law, he is the gaze, though he sleeps through 100 layers. You don't know where they learned it, but the song repeats, echoing from classrooms to markets, fields to barracks. Some even opened a school for applied Alexandrian philosophy, where every personal choice can be justified. With Alexander would choose this. You meet an old soldier, hair white, who served in Alexander's final years. He sits on stone steps, eyes distant. You ask, do you believe Alexander is immortal? He replies, no, but I believe he doesn't need to live to be used. He points to the administrative building ahead. That's where I worked for him. Now I still do. But for his shadow, in the village you stay, they hold a first year after Alexander celebration. Wine, trumpets, dances, a short play about his life and continuation. You're invited. You could skip it, but should attend for collective spirit. You stand at the edge, watching an actor play Alexander, tall young curled hair, step out from behind a curtain, painted with a halo. He raises his hand, says, I am dead, but you are me. Every act of obedience, every Greek letter learned, every bow before my statue, you make me live forever. You see the person beside you nod, then the one next to them. The crowd claps, not because they believe, but because there's no other way to survive. You clap too, not because you agree, but because standing still would make you seen. One night, you write on a small piece of wood, if Alexander is dead, why do we still bow? Then you burn it. You don't keep it, but its ashes rise, clinging to your hair, your clothes, your hands, a reminder that the question hasn't vanished, though no one dares ask it anymore. You see people use his name as an excuse. We need more taxes because Alexander wanted education to grow. We need conscription because Alexander dreamed of strong borders. We ban old languages because Alexander believed in unity. He's the eternal reason, and death only made him a myth, unquestionable. A friend once said, if he were alive, he might forgive, but now he's dead. No one fears disappointing him, only those who replaced him. You're not sure if that's comfort or despair. You go home, light a candle, not for Alexander, for those who vanished, for Aros, for the old woman with the mourning cloth, for the child who sewed a well on their shirt. You whisper their names in the dark, like a quiet prayer. No gods needed, just memory. Alexander is dead, but the system isn't. It lives in every sign, every shield, every lesson, every monotone voice. It no longer needs a leader. It has habits. It has laws. It has fear, turned automatic. You realize his death didn't end things. It's when you saw Alexander doesn't need to live to rule you, because now you bow without orders, and that is his final victory, or rather the victory of the system that took the reins of history in his place. You start to notice you're aging, not when your hair grays or your back aches, but when you tell a story and the child in front of you tilts their head, asking, "Is that true?" The question isn't new, but the way they ask, as if you're spinning a legend, makes you feel not like a storyteller, but a relic. You say, "Long ago, in Halicarnassus, there was a temple of green stone, its ceiling painted with a fire god, whose eyes could see." A child interrupts, "Don't all gods have eyes?" You smile, not from joy, but from wariness to explain. Eyes of the past aren't like eyes now. One pair sees, the other watches. You say children used to play a memory relay in Persian. Another asks, "What's that language?" And you hear in your head the flip of textbook pages, all Greek letters, Greek poems, Greek laws. No room for the tongue you learned scratching with a stick in damp earth behind the house. At the market, you see a vendor named Dionysia, but her cheekbones, voice, eyes are like little Dara you watched when she was learning to speak.
You call Dara.
She starts, looks around, then whispers, "I've never heard that name." Not because she forgot, but because that name was never written down again. And what isn't written vanishes easier than wind. You have a notebook, thin paper, scrawled words, recording every story you recall. Once you read to a teenager about the first statue marked with a strange symbol. They laugh, ask why didn't anyone take a picture? You're silent. That time had no pictures, only people, and people are erased easier than paper. One day, you tell of the old man who sharpened stones and sang softly on his porch. A girl asks, was he real or a symbol? You don't know how to answer, because now your memories are pushed to a hazy place between real and symbol, story and repetition, what you lived and what they think you imagined. You become the old woman who rambles. People pity you, but don't listen. They greet you, but don't ask. They pat your shoulder when you mention the night the kids drew 8 raid suns in the dirt, but they don't ask if those suns were real or just a memory's mirage. You're not angry, not even sad anymore. You understand time doesn't kill memory with fire or sword. It lets it dry out, like a painting no one sees, a song no one sings, and you, the memory keeper, are just an old jar behind a cupboard. Everyone sees it, but no one pours water in. One day, a young person asks, "Grandma, was there really a city where people couldn't speak their own language?" You look at them. They truly don't know. Not acting, not testing you, just no one told them. You nod. Yes. They ask, "So now we can speak, right?" You smile. Yes. But do you know what you'll say? As time passes, you speak less. Not from tiredness, but because your words are like stones dropped in a well, no echo. Young people hear your stories like watching a play, interesting, distant, irrelevant. Some jot down your words, labeling them post-war folklore quotes. You used to be angry. Now you feel lighter. At least they keep a piece of your words. You start burying your notebook, not from fear of it being taken, but because you know one day you'll be gone. And if someone truly wants to hear, they'll find it. You choose an old tree, dig the earth, place the notebook in a wooden box, bury it deep, and set a stone atop with a carved line. If you believe this was once true, each day you sit on your porch, watching the sun, and eyes dim, ears ringing, but each ray reminds you of the neighbor's gaze before they were taken, the lullaby in a tongue erased from maps, the first time you bowed to a statue and thought, "I'm no longer me." People say, "She's lived so long, knows so many stories," but no one asks where those stories began, or if anyone else saw them. Because when the last witness is seen as an old storyteller, truth becomes just anecdote. You age, and you still remember, but now no one believes. And that, perhaps, is the second death. The one needing no burial, just silence, and no one asking again. One soft sun afternoon, like an old song's voice, you sit on your porch, hands trembling as you shell old beans, ears catching the sound of children playing in the yard. They play, build the empire, stacking stones into forts, using branches as spears, leaves as crowns, each wanting to be the great king. One shouts, I'm Alexander, never defeated. They laugh, clap, toss leaves, like victory rain. Then the smallest one, eyes black, hands tiny as unripe figs, runs to you, climbs the steps, sits by your feet, and asks, naturally, clearly, Grandpa, who was Alexander? The question falls light as a feather, but pierces your heart like a handleless dagger. You look up at the child, and for a fleeting second, you see two worlds overlap. This child, your grandchild, born after it all, with no stone statues guarding the paths, no banned books, no slogans, but in their question echoes an era you lived through, when you bowed, when you dreamed of shouting, but never dared. You start to say, Alexander was a king, but the words feel too light, too small to hold the years of control. You think to say, he conquered the world, but you fear you're repeating the first line of the textbook you were forced to memorize. You take a breath, feeling your chest tighten, as if holding too many layers of memory. Then you answer, slowly, as if each word must pass through 1,000 statues. Alexander was, they say, a man, great at winning. The child tilts their head, eyes still bright. Did you meet him? You smile. No, he died long before I was born. Then how do you know he won so much? You scratch your chin, where a scar you never explained sits. You look to the sky, where white clouds drift like the people swept from memory. Because I lived in a city full of his statues. Every road had his face, every story had his name. The child is quiet for a moment, then says, sounds like a fairy tale. You nod. Yes, very much. But you don't say it's a fairy tale written in stone, blood and fear. A fairy tale you had to bow to read, and no one dared tell differently. You want to tell them about Halicarnassus when you were young, how people had to learn a new language, worship new gods, change their names to ones on an approved list, how you passed Alexander's statues and felt less human, just a shadow in human form, living in deliberate silence. You want to tell them about those lost for singing the wrong song, about children moved from classes for remembering the past, about how you carved your name on a brick and buried it under a tree, hoping someone would dig it up and say, this person was here. But then you look at your grandchild, so small, so pure, so light to carry a whole era in words. They ask, was Alexander good or bad, Grandpa? You pause. The question is simple, but you were never allowed to ask it, let alone answer. You recall a soldier saying Alexander doesn't need to be right or wrong, he just needs to be remembered. You look at the child, then say soft as wind, Alexander was someone very well remembered, but not everyone remembers him the same. They don't seem to understand, but they nod. I'll remember like you do. You shake your head. No need. Remember in your own way. And that's enough. You don't say more, don't tell more, don't lecture. You just sit there quietly as the sunset fades over the tiles, the child's hand still on your knee like an anchor, keeping you from drifting fully into the past. You don't need the next generation to believe you or understand. You just need them to ask questions. Because as long as questions remain, Alexander isn't the absolute truth anymore. As long as a child dares ask, Grandpa, who was Alexander, you know one day someone will find their own answer in their own voice. And in that hesitation, you don't feel weak. You feel, at last, living true freedom. No longer answering by books, soldiers, or statues, only by memory, shaky, blurred, or unbelieved. Because memory, in the end, doesn't need belief. It just needs keeping. Like a whisper through a grandchild, on an afternoon, you sit before your house, the evening light spreading over your hands like thin, unwipeable dust. A gentle breeze passes through the old tiles, through your white hair, and you wonder, if no one remembers me, did I ever truly live? It's not the first time you've thought this, but today it comes unannounced. Like a lost child knocking, asking for water, and you realize it wears your own face from before you learned to bow. They call you the old storyteller. Some children like you, some fear you. Adults are polite, sometimes smiling, nodding, but their eyes hold the look of having heard too much, forgotten enough. You don't blame them. This world has run too far forward, and memory keeps falling behind like broken stones by the roadside. You've told many stories, about the first Alexander statue raised in the square, about the child who sewed an 8-rayed sun on their shirt, about the song banned but sung in dreams. about the woman who buried a prayer cord under a tree and whispered to the earth, about you who believed, feared, dreamed of escape, dreamed of return. But each time you tell, your voice grows softer, because each year, fewer listen, fewer believe, fewer understand, and you slowly see you're no longer a storyteller, but a ruin. You have a wooden box, hidden behind a mud wall. Inside are scraps of paper, carved wood, a stone with your name written in your left hand, shaky, blurred, but yours. You once thought to give them to someone, then kept them, not from fear, but because you're not sure anyone needs them. One day, you sit with a young man from another city. He asks, "Do you really believe all that happened?" You look at him, honestly, then nod. "I don't believe. I remember." He laughs. "Memory's the softest thing in the world. Anyone can reshape it." You're silent. Don't argue, because he's not wrong, but not right either. You remember young, someone asking, "Why didn't you stand up, resist?" You answered, "Because I wanted to live." They asked, "Living without being yourself, is that living?" You didn't know, still don't, but you know, if you don't tell, no one will know you were here. Your grandchild visits sometimes, listens. They're grown now, no longer playing Build the Empire, but they still ask, "Tell me again about the box with your name." Each time you repeat the old story about the brick, the name you were forced to change, the day you carved 3 words, "I am still here." They listen, then ask, "But if you're gone one day, who'll tell it?" You look at them, eyes old, but bright. If you remember, they nod, but you're not sure they grasp memory's weight. At the market, you see a child draw an 8-rayed sun in colored chalk on the ground. An adult comes, wipes it away. Don't draw things no one understands. The child looks confused. You start to step forward, to say something, but you stand still, not from fear, but to see if memory returns on its own. You know if no one retells, what happened fades, then is replaced, then rewritten, then erased, then swapped for an easier story, easier to teach, easier to control. And slowly even you, if no one repeats your name, will vanish. You once feared death. Now you fear forgetting more, not being forgotten on a grave, but that what you carry, what you saw, what you kept, will have no one to carry it forward. One night, you take the wooden box, dig deeper, bury it again, but this time you add a paper. If you find this, you don't need to believe, just read. And if you read, I still exist somewhere in your language. You don't need worship, no statues, no rites, just a story continued. A tale heard, a name, not Alexander's, repeated by someone at a fire, or teaching a child, an old lullaby. You live, have lived, and if no one retells, you still live, but like a breath, unvoiced, like a memory carried off by wind between unwritten pages. And that's enough to keep you sitting here, each evening, waiting for a child to ask, "Grandpa, what happened back then?" Because as long as someone asks, you're still part of this world, not in stone, not in books, but in memory, in stories, in someone's whisper. I retell, because if no one does, who'll know we lived? You sit alone in an afternoon, without trumpets, without statues guarding the paths, without anyone shouting slogans, only the sound of wind sweeping lightly over dry ground, and the footsteps of children playing a different game, a game with no kings, no battles, no victories. They drop pebbles into a dry well, then sit quietly, waiting for an echo. You smile, because to you, that is the final image of all hope, a small act, a silent wait, and faith that something will answer. There are no more Alexander statues in the square. They were taken down long ago, not because anyone resisted or won, but because the stone cracked, the foundation sank, and no one had the patience to maintain a man long dead who wouldn't let go of history. The last statue was dismantled into blocks, carted off to build a foundation for a new meeting house. They called it material reuse. You call it Alexander finally resting. No one recites his name each morning. No classes force students to learn praise poems. No rituals demand bowing to statues. Children grow up knowing him as a name in books, listed beside others, not bolded, not underlined. And you, sitting here as summer wind brushes your skin, realize, at last, the empire isn't immortal, as they once promised. No one won. No one lost. No final drumbeat. No whistle signaling the end. Just something slow people forget. Statues crack. Flags fade. Laws change. Languages blend. Everything once certain blurs like paint through 3 rainy seasons. And in that uncertainty, you see true freedom flicker. No one imposing one voice. No one silenced to survive. You've lived long enough to see what the young don't believe. Power doesn't need toppling. It just needs forgetting. And forgetting, strangely, is the quietest victory the weak ever won. You don't rebuild old statues. Don't restore temples. Don't revive grudges. You plant vegetables, collect pebbles, tell stories when asked. And when no one asks, you tell anyway. To the earth, the wind, yourself. Not because you fear being forgotten, but because you know, when words are spoken, memory has a chance to outlast a rainy season. People sometimes invite you to community gatherings to share about the past. You go, sit quietly, don't tell of soldiers, statues, banned languages. You tell of moldy rice porridge, an overflowing well, a man drawing birds in the dirt, a child sewing a sun on their shirt. Small things, details too small to rewrite history, but enough to keep it from being rewritten wrong again. A child asks, "Grandpa, were there heroes back then?" You reply, "Yes, but not as you think." They ask, "Did they win?" You smile, shake your head. "They survived." The child thinks, then nods. They don't fully understand, but you see in their eyes something rare, respect for those who didn't need victory to be remembered. In your final days, you often sit by the tree where you buried the wooden box. You don't dig it up, just sit, because you know, if someone needs it, they'll find it. And if no one does, that's okay. Some things are buried not to be found, but to remind that someone once kept them. Wind blows through the roof. An old cloth flaps, not a flag, no symbols, just a worn brown fabric, hand-stitched, holding a corner of the roof from the sun's pierce. You look at it and see a whole life, patched, quiet, unbroken, unremarkable, but real. The night before you pass, you dream of an empty square, no statues, no soldiers, just people standing, free, not because no one commands them, but because they no longer need commands to live true to themselves. You leave, no will, no possessions, no statues, no need for a gravestone, but your grandchild, now grown, still tells their child, "Great-grandpa lived through a time when his name couldn't be written right, but he kept it in his hands, in stone, in earth." And each time they tell, their eyes turn to where you once sat. The end has no drums, no honors, no monuments, just memory. Memory in stories, in hands secretly writing, in eyes that bowed without breaking. In a world that thought statues were eternal, memory, fragile, invisible, personal, is the only thing that survives. You didn't win, but you weren't erased. And sometimes, in empires built on stone, remembering who you are is the quiet way to reclaim freedom. It ends like this. No statues, no victories, just memory. And a new world where you no longer need permission to tell who you were. The story why being a civilian in a city conquered by Alexander the Great is the last thing you'd want is not just historical imagination, but a subtle warning about how power, language, memory, and truth can be controlled and slowly erased, even in societies that seem as free as the United States today. In the story, the people of Halicarnassus weren't subdued by swords, but by civilized restructuring through schools, language, religion, and political marriages. They were forced to forget their mother tongue, bow to Alexander's statues each morning, and recount history not as they lived it, but as approved. The old woman telling memories to her grandchild, unbelieved, reflects a deep truth. When memory isn't shared, it becomes an echo in the void. In the United States, though free speech and belief are foundations, similar risks loom. Truth distorted by biased media, history rewritten for political aims, language politicized to make people fear speaking their thoughts. Like the story's protagonist, carrying a shield they didn't choose, Americans today can be swept into systems they don't fully grasp or even know are shaping them. The lesson is, keep memory alive, listen to the elderly, share personal stories, teach children more than one version of history, and always ask questions, for if we stop asking, what really happened, freedom won't be taken by guns, but by silence. If you find these memories worth keeping, don't forget to subscribe to join me in telling the stories history often overlooks. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next journey, where memory still lives, though the statues are gone.